let's be clear, Chelsea Manning has served a tough prison sentence. I feel very comfortable that justice has been served and that a message has still been sent.
I mean, to commute Private Manning's sentence was a mistake. Private Manning is a traitor and should not have been turned into a martyr. Private Manning's actions compromised our national security, endangered American personnel downrange.
Well, the commutation is still a focus in Washington. The Vice President-elect, the President at his final news conference, making the decision on the commutation for Chelsea Manning, who leaked the classified documents to WikiLeaks, even against the advice of his defense secretary and top Army officials at the Pentagon. We'll start there and look at this last news conference. Let's bring in our panel. Steve Hilton is a former advisor to British Prime Minister David Cameron. Susan Page, Washington bureau chief at USA Today, and syndicated columnist Charles Krauthammer. Steve, your thoughts on the president's defense of this action, despite his own people saying, don't do it?
Well, I think we shouldn't just dismiss it out of hand. There's obviously a clash here between the personal and the political. On a personal level, you can understand why he would take the view, why the president would take the view that he did. But we've got to remember that there's personal effects on many, many other people as well, not just Chelsea Manning, all the other people who might have been put at risk, who may be put at risk in the future. And in the end, the job of the president is to weigh all of those personal impacts and not just focus on one person, and I think that's the mistake that he made.
The White House press secretary pressing about the GOP outrage that has bubbled up since this decision yesterday afternoon.
I'm tempted to say that this is an astonishing display of intellectual dishonesty from congressional Republicans who endorsed a man for president, who praised WikiLeaks, defended the integrity of Julian Assange.
Now, Vice President-elect Pence, Susan, made the point that Trump didn't defend Julian Assange, but he did talk about the substance of what was in the WikiLeaks, tried to make that distinction.
Remarkable that people view this depending on whether they're getting skewered or benefiting from
which side is benefiting.
Yes, that's right. I mean, I think there's been some examples on both sides of convenient points of view. I thought it was a little surprising that President Obama chose to do this, so because he knows he's going to get political heat for it. There was some pressure on the left on behalf of Chelsea Manning, but it is clearly, you know, these last-minute commutations and pardons that we found with the Clinton administration are something that can have a big effect on how people view you, and it affects what people are saying about you as you're heading out the door. So I thought it was not stunning, but a little surprising that the president.
The Mark Rich pardon happens at the last day for President Clinton leaving. Do you think we're done with pardons and commutations?
I think the White House has made it pretty clear that there's going to be some more to come, although most of the ones that, and President Obama has already done more than any previous president, but most of them have been for people who got long jail sentences for nonviolent drug crimes, which is a less controversial area than we have with Chelsea Manning.
Charles.
I'm just hoping that in the next 48 hours Obama doesn't return Alaska to the Russians. After all, it was an unfair deal. Look, I think it's a disgrace what he did. There was not exactly a groundswell for Chelsea Manning, and I think people know how many people were put in danger. We're talking about Afghan villagers who chose our side over the other, were betrayed by these 500,000 Afghan and Iraqi reports. We know, reported by Jennifer Griffin and by others, particularly here, that there was a Taliban killing spree after the release when they went after people who fit the description of those helping us. This was deadly. This is murder. This is treason. And Obama expressed his sympathy. Oh, the sentence was too long originally. A generation ago, someone who did that on that scale would have been hanged. The 35 years was an act of mercy and restraint. The idea that you would let him go sends exactly the wrong message. We are going to have engagements throughout the world, twilight struggles like these. People in the villages are going to have to decide, do I join the Americans or do I inform against the Americans? Anyone who hears about this, how lenient we are with someone who betrays his country and betrays them, is going to think twice about ever helping us.
The president wouldn't answer Kevin Corke's question about reacting to the Democrats who are boycotting the inauguration, saying that he'll be there. But here he is essentially issuing a warning for the incoming president.
If you find yourself isolated because the process breaks down, or if you're only hearing from people who agree with you on everything, or if you haven't created a process that is fact-checking and probing and asking hard questions about policies or promises that you've made, that's when you start making mistakes.
That is something that Eisenhower told Kennedy. I happen to be studying a little bit of that recently. Steve, what about his messages and the whole Democrats staying out of the inauguration? What's your take of that?
Well, first of all, on that, I just thought that was a ridiculous point for the president to make in terms of not listening to other views in the very week that we've seen refreshingly from Trump, that he's very open to being disagreed with by the people he's appointed. And actually, it seems to me that that description from Obama is more characteristic of how he's run the administration and the groupthink that we've seen in all sorts of ways going on in the last few years. I think in terms of the demonstration, it's probably smart of him to actually stay out of it immediately. But the wider point, which we've discussed many times here, is that it's really disgraceful to see people doing something that is just not an appropriate way to register a protest. Charles has made that very point. There are other ways that the Democrats could have made their protest, for example, boycotting the State of the Union. And I think that's a point that the president could have usefully made today.
What do you think around the world is the perception of this moment Friday? Are heads still exploding? What's going on?
I think that's a pretty good term to describe it, and you see it with the interview that Trump did with the British press and the German press, causing waves all around the world, and people still don't, I think, understand the strength of what Trump has done here in terms of consistently setting out a position on economic policy and on other areas that actually is grounded in the change that people have been looking for, and they focus only on the superficial, not the substance of what Trump represents, but the way he behaves, the tweets and that kind of behavior. And they haven't realized that actually this is a person to be taken seriously.
Susan, did the president miss an opportunity there? You know, he says he's going to be active with the Democratic Party. He's going to speak out after he leaves office, not in the mold of George W. Bush, but in his own mold in his party. But did he miss an opportunity there to say to Democrats, you know, it's about the office, not the man?
Well, unless he agrees with them on the protest, we don't know what his position is on the protest. I thought he had a different warning for Donald Trump, which was these are the circumstances under which I'll get engaged in politics again, and one of them was action on the Dreamers. And that is something that Donald Trump, you can agree with him or not, he's been pretty clear that he wants changes in immigration policy. So we saw Obama laying out several circumstances. A Muslim ban was one of the things he referred to that will draw him back in politics to play a role that no modern president has played after leaving office, which is to become a major voice against the person who succeeds him.
The Dreamers, obviously, the children who are here of illegal immigrants who
are illegal themselves.
Illegal themselves,
yeah.
But they were here, and basically the president had passed an executive order, one of which may be on the table when the president-elect, now coming-in president, starts signing executive orders.
Look, when Trump does stuff that Obama doesn't like, he was implying it's got to be major stuff. I won't speak up on it. But look, Obama had his first opportunity to be critical and to sort of step into the new role, and he flunked it. He was asked thoughts about the boycott. These are members of Congress boycotting an inaugural, not because there's a tampering with the process or any fundamental questioning that the election was a fair and square one, but because they really don't like the guy. That's not a reason. Obama should have said, of course it's up to every member to decide for himself or herself, but if I were a member of Congress, I would honor the process and show up. That's all he had to say, but he didn't want to say it, because this is a man who has shown in his 8 years in office how little respect he has for constitutional norms. For instance, on the executive order on amnesty, not for the Dreamers, but for the 5 million that have been held up by the courts, Obama has said publicly 22 times that he can't do that because it's unconstitutional. And then he goes ahead and does it, and what does he say? If Congress won't act, I will. That's not how the system works. So he's consistent with what he's done in the past, but it was an opportunity that was easy to take today, and he flubbed it.